really means to live life golden. Yeah, we're golden, baby girl, we're golden. They're about to see us shine, cause we're golden. They can never break us down, cause we're golden. They're about to see us glow, cause we're golden.
Danny, welcome back to the podcast.
Mate, pumped.
I think we covered structure on the last episode. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about in business. You know, I think this can make or break a business.
Yeah.
And it's unit economics and pricing, and really talking about the relationship of those two things. You know, I think, again, like the biggest learning for me, I would say, in the last 5 years is that, and just how important that is for the growth of your company long term. So do you just want to explain what unit economics is, and, you know, give it a bit of a breakdown into, you know, what some of the key terms are as well?
Well, let's talk through the way we kind of spoke about it when we were speaking the other day around just two different business models. So without going into the detail of unit economics, we'll talk about business models. And what we touched on was, how does a product business look as a generalization, and how should a service business look as a generalization? So people get into business, they're like, I'm going to make X dollars. It's like, all right, well, how are you spending that money? Like, how's it going to work? So let's break down like a model P&L for each one of those business units as one kind of exercise. And then let's talk about pricing as a separate kind of exercise where it's like, all right, well, how do we influence those economics using price? I love the pricing conversation because it's like, yeah, there's so much variability in it. But so let's talk about the economics of a business. So if I talk about product-based businesses, I'll use e-commerce kind of as our baseline example. Have an e-commerce business. If I make $1, straight away I expect to spend 50 cents of that dollar on product and fulfillment. Yeah. So buying that product, getting that product to the customer. If I can't make that business work at 50%, I'm questioning, do I have the right product to sell or the right pricing of that product?
And that's called your gross margin.
That's my gross margin.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's like, if I'm in a product-based business, I want to try and get a gross margin of 50%. That's not, I'm not sitting here going, hey, every single business in the whole country needs to operate that way. Saying if I'm starting a new brand today, that's what I'm aiming for. And then I'm making a decision, or I'm understanding why it's not that, if it's not that.
Yeah. And so, you know, this is basically talking about all the input costs, you know, that basically helps you create the product. So what would it cost you to reproduce another unit of your product?
So if I'm selling a t-shirt, how much did it cost to make and print on that t-shirt?
Yep.
So if it cost me $20 to make that t-shirt, and it's going to cost me $10 to ship it to the customer, it's cost me $30 essentially to get that t-shirt sold to the customer, made and sold. So I need to sell that t-shirt for $60 to make a 50% profit. And
that's at a minimum, you know, like you can, and is it true that what they say around the better your gross margin, the better your business in a sense?
We'll talk about this a bit deeper in a sec, but everything in my opinion, everything in that business is about making that gross margin as good as possible.
Yep.
But understanding that the higher you make that gross margin, the more room you leave for competitors to come in and undercut your pricing. But we'll touch on that in pricing. But yeah, so product-based business, e-commerce business, starting point is I'm trying to make sure my product and fulfillment costs are 50%. Yeah. If I can't make that work, I'm looking at it very closely and going, all right, why? Because why it's important is I can't solve that problem with scale. By selling more t-shirts isn't going to make that margin better.
Yep.
I know that every time I teach, that's the maximum I can make, because that, you know, it might go down slightly on volume, but it's not going to dramatically reduce. It still costs me the same to ship every item. It still costs me the same to make every t-shirt. Yeah. I can go to China, or I can do some stuff, and understanding how I can bring down that cost is important. But you need a business model that works on a 50% margin in product-based business as a benchmark.
Yep.
Again, there will be differences, but just understand those differences. Then I go, all right, cool. I've made my 50% margin. How much do I have left to spend on other stuff? Most people will say, well, you've got 50% left because you can spend all of it. But I'm in business to make a profit, so I don't want to spend it all. So generally speaking, again, product-based businesses, we're saying you got a 30% budget left. So if I sell something for $1, I've got 30 cents left to spend on rent, marketing, employees, accounting, insurance, whatever those other costs are that make up that business. I've only got 30% left to spend so that I can make a 20% profit.
That's your OPEX?
That's my OPEX.
Operating expenses?
Yeah, they're my operating expenses. So the overhead costs that I have to pay, regardless of if I have to sell one shirt or 1,000 shirts, I have to pay those expenses. Obviously, the bigger my business gets, the higher those expenses get. That's why we've got that percentage to work with. But marketing's included in that. So marketing's a big one because that's the one we go to increase, to grow the top line revenue. So we have to make sure that, our marketing efficiency is high so that we can make these numbers work. So really top line, and we'll delve into that a bit deeper, but product-based business, 50% gross margin. So 50% of everything I spend is going to product cost and fulfillment, and then 30% OPEX. So all those overheads. So I'm left with 20%. That's what I'm benchmarking a P&L on.
Yeah, and as a company, when you say like benchmarking my P&L, it's really going we're setting targets for all of these, and then that becomes how we operate in all of these different departments.
Exactly. So we use it to set the target or to create a model P&L. And obviously early on, we're never going to hit these numbers, but we want to understand why and make decisions around it. Like I've said to you before, like I don't mind that we don't hit budgets or numbers or whatever. I just like that we make decisions based on that. Like we're not accidentally overspending on marketing. We're deliberately overspending on marketing because we've decided that's what we're going to do. So we use it to build out that benchmark, and then we make decisions of where we're going to spend if we are going to. So that's for product. If we go to a service-based business, accounting firm, lawyer, anyone selling time essentially as their product, agency, yep. What I'm generally benchmarking is a 35% cost of labor. So if we get $100 in, $35 is going to staff. That includes the owner's time generally if they're working on client stuff. So 35% of all the money that comes in goes to staff. Then I've got another 30% roughly, same as the other business, to spend on overheads, rent, etc., that it takes to run those businesses. And it leaves me with about 30% profit. Yeah. 35% profit.
And so how you were just going back to that basically cost of service, the way, and this is something that you guys taught me as well, is like, having a charge out rate or charge out rate targets on fulfilling the work.
The service. Yeah.
The service.
So, obviously the easy way of doing it, I got a hairdresser. Hairdresser cost me $50 an hour. For me to make 35%, I need to charge that hairdresser $150 an hour, roughly. Mm-hmm. So you have to make sure that you're charging the customers enough that you can make money within that business. But we'll get into pricing again in a second, but that goes back to the pricing. If, the cost of labor is obviously going up in Australia, which means the price of the haircut should be going up with it. But as you put your haircut price up and the competitor next door doesn't, people start moving, like people can't take in their service next door because you're leaving room for people to come in and undercut you. Yep. So that you've got to get that right mix between pricing, margin, etc., your input costs to make that work. But again, it's important to have a target and have a model that you're working to and doing it deliberately, as opposed to getting a P&L once a year from your accountant and accidentally going, oh, we made money or we lost money. We're not sure why, but this is where we landed. So yeah, model P&L, 30%, 35% goes to labor, 30% goes to overheads. You're left with 35% profit. They're the two kind of models that we start with. And then again, we'll model out a business against that and see where we're going to overspend, underspend. That makes sense?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I mean, the reason I think that's so important is because it can literally make or break your business. Like the amount of businesses that I was involved in my early days in my consulting, where, the first thing they or question they ask themselves about pricing is what's fair.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, oh, what don't I feel bad about charging?
Yeah.
Right? If you haven't operated businesses before, and then as you understand unit economics, what you start to think is go, okay, well, what are our labor costs to actually get to
deliver that service? To
deliver the service. And then more importantly, how do we create demand so that we can increase price, which you obviously talk about soon.
The number one conversation, there's two major conversations I'll have with business owners when they come on board is, one, they have zero idea of how their own business is performing, let alone how it benchmarks against anything. So getting them to start to think about their business as percentages and having something to benchmark against. And secondly is put up your prices, because 99 times out of 100, they're underpricing their service because they literally do what you said and just go to what's fair, or they look at the guy next door who has also said what's fair and done no thinking about it and copy his pricing. So, and and most people are very scared to touch their pricing. There's this fear in us all, and I've been guilty of it too, as I know you are or have been, of annoying anyone or upsetting anyone by putting up our prices. But it's like, you have to have that convo, because the worst thing you can do is go out of business, because it's not profitable to run a business at a loss. Like,
Yeah.
and most people blindly are. And again, they speak. I met with someone the other day, been with their accountant for 25 years. She's like, oh, I think we made a loss this year. I'm like, well, when you say you think, what do you mean you think? She's like, I've got the financial reports from the accountant. I'm like, okay, show me them. This is 18 months or 9 months after year end, sorry. And they've been making a loss for the last 8 years, and they had no idea. Like, business owners don't get into this detail.
Yeah. And it's so important to do it as well. And I think, we'll probably touch on it soon as well, but like, there's also like understanding the relationship between your unit economics as well. Like, you kind of talked about it before, but, and even the conversation around putting up your prices, it's relative to what you're trying to achieve, right? It's like, do you want to improve your margin? Great, put up prices. Okay, there is a consequence that comes with that if you understand that consequence or the risk associated and you're willing to make that bet, or that's the direction you want to go in, it then leads to follow-up conversation or decisions to be made. So, all right, we want to put our prices up. One, we have to justify that to the customer. Two, we have to be able to warrant that with brand and trust.
Yep.
And so they're really good conversations. Or you can go the other way and you can say, well, I actually don't want to be seen
as premium.
We actually want to be seen as someone who can service everybody, and then that's a different conversation, and more a strategic conversation as well. So
the point is, it's deliberate. It's a deliberate conversation. It's not by accident. And I actually think Brett Kelly told me this. There's like two worlds to live in. There's, I'm the premium, I'm the best, or I'm the cheapest and I'm going to mass market, and everyone in between is dead. Essentially, like, there's a lineup outside of Louis Vuitton if you want to buy handbags, and there's a lineup outside Kmart for the cheapest possible handbag, but there's no one lining up at Oroton or anything. Like, they don't care. There's no market for it.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true.
That's right.
Yeah, it's so true. It's so true. And do we want to talk?
So can we talk about gross profit further and go into pricing?
Yeah.
So you said before, gross profit's the most important number. The reason it's the most important number is the more you sell, the more money you're creating, the more dollars you're creating with your gross profit. If you don't have that percentage right, then you can't scale your business. So if I'm only making 10% margin and I sell $1 million, I only make 100 grand. If I'm making 50% margin and I sell $1 million, I make 500 grand. So getting that percentage right really matters. You touched on, it doesn't matter if it's small or large as long as you're deliberately doing it. And that's 100% true. Jeff Bezos says, your margin's my opportunity. Like, his Amazon business model is little margin as possible, as much volume as possible. It's fine. It's just a very different business to most people. But like, go deep. If you're a business owner and you're listening to this, go deep in your gross margin. How much labor cost does it take to deliver your service? Or how much is your product costing to produce and fulfill to sell to a customer? Getting into that.
Yeah. And can you talk to the idea of gross margin mattering as you get bigger as well? Like, it's because I feel like in the early days you can get away with a lot more, but the bigger you get, the more important that gross margin number becomes.
Most people go to, I'll solve it later with size. They think that size will fix the gross margin, but it never does. If you've got a fat, unhealthy business in year one, it's likely that if you 10 times the business, you haven't fixed the problem. So what we're saying there is, if you're making 50% margin on $1 million, or 10% margin on $1 million, you're still going to make 10% margin on $10 million. It's still not, for most business owners, there's not enough dollars to solve the operating expense that it takes to run the business, because you still have to pay the bigger rent bill and the more employees and the bigger marketing that you have at a $10 million business, but you don't have enough margin to invest into it. So don't look at don't look at size as a solution to margin, because that's what most people do. It's not. Get your margin right as early as possible so you can scale up with a higher gross margin.
Yeah.
And then use pricing. So can we swing into pricing?
Yeah.
So pricing's the variable in getting the right margin. You can only drop the cost that it takes to make a t-shirt so far. Like, yeah, cool, I got the t-shirt from $11 to $10. I can't get it to $0. That makes sense. Same with employee costs. Like, if I'm in a service-based business, I can't pay you less than the minimum wage, nor do I want to. So I can only reduce that cost so much. So the only lever I have is pricing and efficiency, which is, how do I either increase the price of my products and justify that pricing to someone, or how do I get my employee to produce more work in less hours, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there's not much things to talk about, but we talk about price a lot.
And if you can do both of those things at the same time, that's a great business.
Massively.
For every, for every other dollar that you bring into your business, if your margins are getting better because of those two things,
It's all drop into the bottom line.
you've got a great business.
So if we talk about pricing, like when someone comes on day one and they go, hey, I'm starting a t-shirt business, like how much should I sell that t-shirt for? Like, it's an unlimited answer. And what do you reckon people go to? Like, what are your answers if I said to you, how are you going to price your t-shirt?
Oh, I mean, if you had asked me 5 years ago, it would have been what's Front Runner selling their t-shirt for?
Yeah.
What's YKTR selling their t-shirt for?
That's literally what happens. They look at the competitor, they go next door and see what they're selling for, and they make that decision. But you could go online and you can find a $1,200 t-shirt. Like, there's always a price point that exists. You got to go to, all right, what's the brand I want to be? Where do I want to position myself in the market? And go deep into that conversation. Someone like Louis Vuitton or like Hermes, like those big brands that live in the marketplace, their cost of making that product isn't as exponential as what their price point is versus the cheaper brands. But they take all that extra margin and then they spend it on building brand and building customer experience and creating a business that you want to, as a customer, be a part of, and spend $5,000 on a handbag.
It's like Ferrari, you get free services, like stuff like that is like, no one would give that away, the services of your car.
Yeah.
But Ferrari can, because they have the margin.
They make the margin. So they build all that stuff in. And again, it's not that they're taking all that margin and going, we're making 60% profit at the bottom line. They're probably making a better profit at the bottom line, but they take that extra margin and they invest it into building a bigger and bigger brand out in the market. So we get, if you can get people to understand, deliberately set a gross margin target and then deliberately work on pricing to get to that brand positioning place in the market, goes a long way to building a healthy business. You can always manage the OPEX expenses. You can always get a new rent deal, or like there's things you can do there.
More often than not, they're fixed too.
They're pretty fixed.
Yeah.
So there's not like, once a year we can go through it, or once every few years we can go through it and renegotiate some stuff, but you can't massively move the dial on a lot of it. The margin, the pricing stuff is really set by that owner and going, who do I want my business to be? What's the value proposition to the customer? How do I justify, whether it's cheap or high, how do I justify that price in the market?
Last point I want you to touch on is the importance of having an accurate P&L.
Same. So I touched on that story a second ago about the guys that came through last week and hadn't looked at their P&L for 9 months. It's just that idea of deliberately making decisions. So if we're going to go through the effort of setting up a business, we're going to this effort of setting up a business, and we're not going to have the idea that we're going to check the scoreboard every month to see how we're going. It's like you're just running blind. It's like playing a football game, and we'll find out the score in 12 months' time if we won or lost, and not having to score along the way.
Yeah, or we're not scoring the game at all, but we're playing for points.
We're playing for points, yeah.
Right, and so like you can't navigate a
Are
quarter.
we in the lead? Oh yeah, it's
it's
crazy.
the last quarter. Who's winning?
Yeah, who
How do we know
cares?
the intensity,
It's crazy.
the speed that we need to move at?
But that's like people don't love numbers, generally speaking. Like as business owners, we're not training it, so they don't love it, so they delay it and they put off the conversation. So naturally they'll go, I'm not looking at that. But the importance of having that scoreboard every month, having that benchmark P&L, seeing how you're tracking against it, and deliberately running your business and making decisions will change your business.
But also the accuracy, like what are your direct costs, right?
Yeah,
like that's the thing that I, even myself as even I would say, especially over the last 6 months, we're in a service-based business. We're pushing as hard as we can to grow. Every dollar counts right now. So it's the accuracy of the P&L, and what are your inputs? What are your direct costs? Do you have direct costs that are going through OPEX that you're not getting, so you're not having an accurate understanding of what your gross margin is?
What I'll say is the accuracy is super important. Like shit goes in, shit comes out. If we're not getting the right data, it's irrelevant. But by taking the effort of reading your P&L and benchmarking it against something, will force it to become accurate, because you're looking at it and you're going, oh, my percentages are out Y. And then you have that conversation with the bookkeeper, accountant, whoever, and they go, oh, because that's a direct cost. That's not. Like just starting that cycle of monthly going, how did I perform? What would a benchmark look like in my industry, why am I different, will force it to become more and more accurate every month. You don't need to solve it. If
Right
you sit
now.
there and go, hey, yeah, I want the perfect P&L today, you get perfection paralyzes you. Just start looking at it monthly and trending it to be better over 6 months, and it'll end up being a pretty good P&L. Better
Yeah.
than 99% of people that never look at their P&L.
Yeah, you're just refining.
Yeah, exactly.
Mate, Danny, first of all, get yourself an accountant who thinks about business like Danny. That's the one thing I got to say. I think having someone who's not only just passionate about doing your best, but also is passionate about helping you grow your business and invested. That's what I can't recommend these guys enough. So another awesome episode. Thanks again, Danny, for sharing your knowledge. And I really hope everyone enjoyed the episode.
I appreciate you, mate. Happy to share. Hey, Danny from Kelly Partners, Northern Beaches here. Hope you're really loving these conversations with Kyle. If you're looking for an accountant that wants to do more than just your BASs and taxes and be a real partner in your business, feel free to hit us up. We have an amazing team out on the beaches who deal with business owners every single day. Looking to provide proactive advice, get in front of your business and help you make those decisions that are really going to make a difference in the long term for your life. Reach us anytime. If anyone wants to book in a free discovery session where we'll go through your business and see how we can help, hit us up at northernbeaches@kellypartners.com.au.